Every military expert said the same thing about North Korea: outdated equipment, poor training, more propaganda than capability. Then, in early 2024, new hypersonic tests succeeded where previous attempts had failed. Cyber attacks disrupted South Korean GPS systems for hours. Combat troops gained real battlefield experience in Ukraine. Suddenly, those 2020 and 2021 parade displays of M2020 tank prototypes and KN-25 rocket launchers started looking less like theater and more like warnings of what was actually being built behind closed doors. The Korean People's Army of 2025 isn't the same force we've been analyzing for decades. So what changed, and what does it mean for global security? The transformation runs deeper than new weapons and flashy demonstrations. Behind every missile test and military parade lies a more fundamental question that most analysts have been avoiding: the economic foundation behind the military surge. That question centers on money. How does a country crushed under international sanctions suddenly find billions to modernize its entire military? North Korea's weapons programs weren't running on wishful thinking and scrap metal. Something changed dramatically in how Pyongyang finances its armed forces, and the numbers tell a story that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. Back in 2020, North Korea's military budget was estimated at roughly $4.7 billion annually, which sounds substantial until you realize that covered everything from soldier salaries to nuclear research. The country was importing almost everything it needed for weapons production, from specialized metals to electronic components, and doing so at massive markups through third-party networks. The math simply didn't add up for the kind of comprehensive modernization we started seeing by 2024. Then something shifted. Kim Jong-un implemented what intelligence analysts now call pragmatic market reforms, starting in 2021. These weren't the grand pronouncements you'd expect from a communist dictatorship. Instead, they were quiet policy changes that allowed private markets to expand, permitted more foreign currency transactions, and crucially, legitimized what had been underground economic activity for decades. Suddenly, North Korean entrepreneurs weren't just surviving in the shadows. They were generating taxable revenue that flowed directly into state coffers. The cryptocurrency operations changed everything. North Korean hackers, operating under units like the Lazarus group, pulled off some of the most sophisticated theft operations in digital history. The Ronin network hack netted $625 million, while the Harmony Protocol breach brought in another $100 million, representing just two examples from over $1.2 billion stolen in 2024 alone. These weren't amateur operations. They involved months of planning, social engineering, and technical expertise that rivaled anything seen from state-sponsored groups in Russia or China. But the real game changer was Ukraine. When Russia's invasion began in February 2022, North Korea suddenly found itself with a customer desperate enough to buy whatever they could produce. Artillery shells that had been sitting in warehouses for decades became hot commodities. The old Soviet standard 152 rounds that North Korea manufactured by the millions were exactly what Russian forces needed. Intelligence estimates suggest arms sales to Russia generated over $20 billion in revenue, with North Korea shipping more than 3 million artillery shells throughout 2023 and 2024 at prices substantially higher than normal market rates due to urgent demand. The weapons appearing on Ukrainian battlefields told their own story about North Korean production capabilities. Russian forces started using North Korean-manufactured KN-23 short-range ballistic missiles in late 2023. These weren't export versions with downgraded components. They were the same systems North Korea tested for its own military. When Ukrainian forces recovered debris from these missiles, they found manufacturing dates from 2023, proving that North Korean production lines were operating at full capacity and producing weapons with current generation components. Satellite imagery from 2024 revealed the scale of this industrial expansion. The Kangjai General Tractor Plant, a facility that had been dormant for years, showed clear signs of heavy activity throughout the year. New buildings appeared at the complex, along with expanded rail connections and increased truck traffic. Similar patterns emerged at the February 11 factory near Hamhung and the Kusong machine complex. These weren't minor upgrades. They represented fundamental expansions in production capacity. Commercial satellite photos showed construction crews working around the clock at multiple weapons facilities. The Sanamdong missile assembly plant near Hamhung doubled in size between January and December 2024. New warehouses, testing facilities, and worker housing appeared at a pace that suggested unlimited funding. The new Yongbyon enrichment building was completed by May 2025, boosting highly enriched uranium output by 73 to 98 kilograms per year. Intelligence analysts calculated that these expansions represented investments of at least $500 million across multiple facilities, money that simply hadn't existed in North Korea's budget projections just 2 years earlier. The financial flows became clearer when you tracked the sanctions evasion networks. North Korean operatives established shell companies in Malaysia, Singapore, and the UAE that specialized in procuring dual-use technologies. These companies purchased everything from precision machine tools to specialized alloys, often paying premium prices for items that would normally require export licenses. The fact that they could afford these markups suggested revenue streams far beyond what traditional analysis had identified. Intelligence estimates now place North Korea's military budget at approximately $7.8 billion for 2024, more than double the 2020 figure. This increase wasn't gradual. Most of it occurred between 2022 and 2024, coinciding exactly with the cryptocurrency operations and arms sales to Russia. The budget breakdown shows massive increases in research and development spending, procurement of foreign components, and facility construction, all areas that had been severely constrained just a few years earlier. The sustainability question becomes crucial when projecting forward. North Korean officials understand that cryptocurrency theft has a shelf life, security measures improve, and targets become harder to reach. The arms sales to Russia, while profitable, depend on a conflict that won't last forever. This explains the frantic pace of military modernization throughout 2024. North Korea was essentially spending its windfall as quickly as possible to lock in permanent capability improvements before the revenue streams dried up. What makes this economic transformation particularly significant is how it solved North Korea's traditional military procurement problems. For decades, the country struggled with quality control, supply chain reliability, and technological obsolescence. The new funding allowed them to purchase higher-grade materials, hire better technicians, and invest in production equipment that actually worked. The result was weapons systems that performed closer to their design specifications, rather than the jury-rigged approximations that characterized earlier North Korean military hardware. This economic foundation explains why North Korea's military improvements happened so quickly after 2022. It wasn't just that they developed new weapons. They developed the industrial and financial capacity to produce, maintain, and continuously improve those weapons. That capability, built on cryptocurrency theft and arms sales, now supports the military machine that's making everyone recalculate their threat assessments in 2025. And nowhere was that recalculation more urgent than in the early hours of a January morning, when Western defense officials realized their assumptions about North Korean missile technology were dangerously wrong. Hypersonic reality check their Hwasong 16B tests. The phone call came at 3:47 a.m. Eastern Time on January 14, 2025. A Pentagon official woke up missile defense analysts across 3 time zones with the same message: we need to recalculate everything. Hours earlier, North Korea had test-fired what they called a new intermediate-range ballistic missile that flew further, faster, and more accurately than any Western intelligence model had predicted possible. The missile traveled over 1,000 kilometers, executed multiple course corrections during flight, and demonstrated precision that placed the impact within meters of its intended target. Every computer simulation, every threat assessment, every defensive countermeasure had been built on assumptions that were proving dangerously outdated. What made this test so unsettling wasn't just the performance numbers. Previous North Korean missile attempts had been obvious failures dressed up as successes. Earlier systems frequently broke apart during boost phases or followed predictable trajectories that existing missile defense systems could easily track and intercept. Intelligence analysts had categorized most North Korean missile claims as typical Pyongyang propaganda, inflated beyond recognition to mask fundamental technical limitations. This test changed that assessment overnight. Telemetry data captured by Japanese and South Korean monitoring stations showed a missile that maintained stable flight throughout its entire trajectory. The warhead separated cleanly from the booster, executed controlled maneuvers during flight, and maintained guidance accuracy that indicated genuine capability advancement rather than propaganda theater. The technical specifications that intelligence agencies confirmed painted a picture of real progress. The missile used what appeared to be a configuration similar to the KN-23 system, but with modifications suggesting continued development rather than simple reproduction of existing designs. The KN-23, North Korea's version of Russia's Iskander missile, had already demonstrated concerning capabilities with its depressed trajectory flight path that complicates interception efforts. This newer system appeared to build on those lessons while extending range and improving accuracy. Flight test data from multiple launches throughout 2024 revealed consistent guidance system performance that exceeded expectations. The KN-25 multiple rocket launcher system, with its documented 380-kilometer range, had already shown North Korea could achieve precision strikes at extended distances. Intelligence reports indicated Kim Jong-un had specifically praised these systems for their potential in strategic surprise strikes, language that suggested operational rather than experimental status. The guidance systems represented perhaps the most significant advancement. Earlier North Korean missiles relied heavily on inertial navigation that provided limited accuracy over long distances. The newer systems appeared to incorporate multiple guidance methods, including terminal guidance capable of target recognition and course correction during final approach phases. This capability transformed these weapons from area effect systems into precision strike platforms capable of targeting specific buildings or installations. These capabilities posed specific challenges for missile defense systems deployed throughout the region. The Aegis installations in South Korea and Japan were designed to intercept ballistic missiles following predictable parabolic trajectories. Missiles that could change course multiple times during flight presented fundamentally different tracking and interception problems. The terminal high-altitude area defense systems faced similar limitations, as their radar systems and interceptor missiles were optimized for conventional ballistic trajectories rather than the depressed flight paths that North Korean systems increasingly employed. The implications for regional targets were particularly concerning. The demonstrated ranges easily encompassed critical military installations throughout South Korea and Japan from North Korean launch sites. The precision guidance capability made these systems suitable for targeting specific facilities rather than general area bombardment, fundamentally changing the threat calculation for military planners. Evidence of technological advancement appeared throughout North Korea's missile program. The restoration of the Punggye-ri nuclear test site, completed by late 2024, provided additional infrastructure for weapons development and testing. Satellite imagery showed expanded facilities and increased activity levels that suggested sustained rather than sporadic development efforts. The strategic impact of confirmed precision strike capability forced regional military planners to reconsider fundamental assumptions about deterrence and defense. Previously, North Korean missile threats involved systems that US and allied forces could track, predict, and potentially intercept using existing defensive measures. Weapons that could arrive with minimal warning and execute unpredictable flight paths changed the calculus for both defensive planning and crisis management. Expert assessments of operational readiness suggested North Korea had moved beyond experimental phases into limited production status. The consistent performance across multiple tests, combined with the appearance of transport and launch equipment designed specifically for these systems, indicated commitment to fielding these weapons operationally. Intelligence estimates suggested North Korea possessed operational quantities of these systems, with production capacity to manufacture additional units given current resource allocation. The reliability metrics derived from the test program showed success rates that compared favorably to established missile programs. More importantly, the failures that did occur appeared to involve minor technical issues rather than fundamental design problems. These were the types of issues that typically resolved themselves as manufacturing processes matured and quality control improved. What made these developments genuine game changers wasn't just their technical capabilities, but how those capabilities altered the strategic balance in Northeast Asia. North Korea now possessed weapons systems that could strike high-value targets across the region with minimal warning and limited defensive options. This wasn't propaganda theater designed to extract concessions or gain international attention. But technical capabilities alone don't make an effective military force. The most sophisticated weapon systems mean nothing without soldiers who understand how to use them in actual combat conditions. And for the first time in over 70 years, North Korean forces were about to get that experience in ways that would fundamentally change how they approached warfare. Battlefield lessons from Ukraine, combat experience gained. The deployment began quietly in March 2024, when approximately 1,500 North Korean soldiers were transporting to Russia for training in Vladivostok, according to South Korean National Intelligence Service reports. These weren't volunteers or advisors. They were active duty personnel from elite units within the Korean People's Army, selected specifically for their technical expertise and physical conditioning. Russian authorities provided them with standard Russian military uniforms and documentation designed to obscure their origins, but intelligence agencies tracked their movement from training facilities in Usheries to forward positions in the Kursk region. What makes this deployment historically significant isn't just the numbers involved, though US intelligence estimates up to 10,000 troops in Kursk by early 2025. It's the fact that North Korean military doctrine has been theoretical since the Korean War armistice. Every tactical manual, every training scenario, every strategic assumption has been based on simulations, historical studies, and exercises that couldn't replicate the chaos and unpredictability of actual combat. North Korean officers have spent their entire careers preparing for a war they'd never experienced, using equipment they'd never tested under fire, against enemies whose capabilities they could only guess at. Intelligence reports on North Korean soldiers' performance revealed adaptation patterns that surprised Western military analysts. Initial deployments focused on artillery operations, an area where North Korean forces had extensive theoretical training, but no practical experience with counter-battery fire, electronic warfare interference, or precision-guided munitions targeting their positions. Within weeks, North Korean units demonstrated improved camouflage techniques under counter-battery fire as seen near Donetsk support zones, better communication discipline, and more effective use of terrain than their training had suggested possible. They were learning, and learning quickly. The combat experience gained in Ukraine is being systematically documented and transmitted back to North Korea through multiple channels. Military attachés at the North Korean embassy in Moscow compile after-action reports based on debriefings with rotating personnel. Senior officers embedded with North Korean units produce detailed analyses of Western weapons capabilities, Ukrainian tactics, and Russian operational procedures. This information doesn't just sit in filing cabinets. It gets integrated into KPA training programs, tactical manuals, and strategic assessments. North Korean forces in Ukraine operated a wide range of weapon systems that provided hands-on experience with equipment they'd only seen in technical manuals. They maintained Russian-supplied artillery systems, operated communication equipment under combat conditions, and worked with electronic warfare systems designed to counter Western technology. More importantly, they experienced the maintenance challenges, supply chain requirements, and operational limitations that only become apparent during sustained combat operations. This practical knowledge fills gaps that decades of peacetime training couldn't address. The lessons learned about modern battlefield communications proved particularly valuable. North Korean military doctrine had emphasized centralized command structures and rigid communication protocols that worked fine during exercises, but proved inadequate under the dynamic conditions of actual combat. North Korean units in Ukraine learned to operate with greater initiative at the unit level, adapt to communication disruptions, and coordinate operations without constant direction from higher headquarters. These adaptations directly influenced new training protocols implemented at KPA facilities throughout 2024. Logistics coordination presented another learning opportunity that peacetime exercises couldn't replicate. North Korean forces experienced the complexity of maintaining supply lines under constant threat, managing ammunition consumption during extended engagements, and coordinating medical evacuation procedures under fire. They learned how quickly combat operations consume resources, how supply chain disruptions cascade through operational planning, and how logistical limitations constrain tactical options. This experience informed North Korean assessments of their own supply capabilities and highlighted areas requiring improvement. Perhaps most significantly, North Korean forces gained direct exposure to Western weapon systems in combat conditions. They experienced firsthand how Ukrainian forces employed NATO standard equipment, observed the capabilities and limitations of Western-supplied artillery systems, and learned to recognize the signatures of various Western surveillance and targeting technologies. This exposure provided intelligence value that traditional espionage or technical analysis couldn't match. They saw how these systems performed under stress, identified their vulnerabilities, and developed countermeasures based on actual battlefield experience. The impact on North Korean training became evident in modified exercise patterns observed by satellite surveillance throughout 2024. Training facilities that had focused on conventional tactics began incorporating rapid adaptation in artillery concealment and night fighting with night vision goggles, reflecting lessons learned in Ukraine. Units started practicing operations designed to counter Western-style combined arms tactics, suggesting that combat experience was being translated into specific defensive preparations for potential conflict on the Korean peninsula. Conventional unit preparation also evolved based on Ukrainian battlefield lessons. North Korean artillery units modified their firing procedures to account for counter-battery threats that hadn't been emphasized in previous training. Infantry formations practiced dispersal techniques designed to minimize casualties from precision-guided munitions. Command units implemented communication protocols that maintained operational security while allowing for tactical flexibility. These changes represented fundamental shifts in how North Korean forces approached operational planning and execution. The transformation in North Korean understanding of modern warfare dynamics extends beyond tactical adjustments to strategic-level assessments. North Korean military planners gained realistic assessments of how quickly modern conflicts consume resources, how technological advantages translate into battlefield effectiveness, and how coalition warfare actually functions in practice. They observed how Western intelligence capabilities support tactical operations, how precision munitions change target prioritization, and how electronic warfare affects all aspects of military operations. What makes this combat experience particularly dangerous from a regional security perspective is how it enhances North Korean military effectiveness beyond what equipment specifications or training exercises suggest. Paper assessments of North Korean capabilities typically focus on hardware performance, unit organization, and theoretical tactical doctrine. But military effectiveness depends heavily on practical experience, institutional knowledge, and the confidence that comes from successful operations under fire. North Korean forces now possess something they haven't had since the 1950s, a cadre of combat veterans who understand modern warfare from direct experience rather than textbook study. These veterans will train the next generation of North Korean military personnel, influence tactical doctrine development, and provide realistic assessments of North Korean capabilities relative to potential opponents. That institutional knowledge transforms the Korean People's Army from a theoretical threat into a force with proven combat adaptability and modern operational experience. But conventional warfare represents only one dimension of North Korea's military capabilities. While their soldiers gained battlefield experience in Ukraine, another branch of their military was conducting operations that required no boots on the ground, no physical presence, and no traditional weapons. These operations could cripple entire nations without firing a single shot, and in 2024, they demonstrated just how vulnerable modern societies had become to attacks that originated thousands of miles away. The cyber arsenal, digital warfare capabilities in 2025. North Korean cyber operations have fundamentally altered how modern conflicts can be fought and won. At 2:15 a.m. on November 8, 2024, GPS signals across large portions of South Korea simply disappeared. Aircraft approaching Incheon International Airport lost navigation capability and had to divert to alternate airports. Maritime traffic in the Yellow Sea found their positioning systems completely unreliable. The jamming continued for hours, demonstrating that North Korean electronic warfare capabilities positioned near the DMZ could disrupt satellite-based systems that modern society depends on for everything from navigation to financial transactions. This GPS disruption represented just one example of North Korea's expanding cyber arsenal. The Lazarus Group, North Korea's premier hacking organization, executed some of the most sophisticated cryptocurrency thefts in digital history throughout 2024. The Ronin network attack alone netted $625 million, while coordinated strikes against multiple decentralized finance platforms brought total cryptocurrency theft to over $1.2 billion for the year. These weren't random criminal enterprises. They were systematic operations designed to generate revenue that directly funded North Korea's military modernization programs. North Korea's evolution into a serious cyber threat began with simple financial crimes in the early 2010s, progressed through the 2014 Sony Pictures hack and the 2016 Bangladesh bank heist that successfully transferred $81 million, then accelerated dramatically after 2020. The US Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency now labels North Korea as a sophisticated and agile cyber threat, acknowledging that their capabilities extend far beyond the embarrassing email leaks and website defacements that characterized their early operations. The March 2024 attacks on South Korean infrastructure demonstrated North Korean hackers had developed capabilities to target industrial control systems that manage power distribution and water treatment facilities. While these attacks didn't cause the complete grid collapse that many feared, they successfully disrupted operations at multiple facilities and forced emergency protocols at critical infrastructure sites. The attacks proved North Korean cyber units could move beyond financial theft to actually interfere with the basic services that modern societies require to function. The integration of artificial intelligence into North Korean cyber operations represents their most significant capability advancement in recent years. North Korean hackers now use AI algorithms to identify system vulnerabilities automatically, reducing attack planning time from months to weeks. Machine learning systems help them adapt their methods in real time as defensive measures attempt to block their access. AI-powered social engineering tools generate convincing fake identities and communication patterns that make their phishing attempts far more successful than traditional approaches. North Korea organizes its cyber warfare capabilities primarily through the Reconnaissance General Bureau, with Bureau 121 serving as the primary operational unit. Intelligence estimates suggest approximately 7,000 active hackers work within these organizations, making North Korea's cyber force larger than many countries' entire intelligence agencies. The regime recruits talented students from technical universities and provides them with specialized training at facilities that focus exclusively on offensive cyber operations. These cyber units operate from multiple locations, both inside North Korea and internationally. Many North Korean hackers work from overseas locations, including China, Southeast Asia, and Eastern Europe, where they can access faster internet connections and avoid some detection methods that specifically target North Korean IP addresses. This distributed operational model makes it extremely difficult for defensive agencies to track and counter their activities. The economic impact of North Korean cyber operations has become staggering in scope. Unlike traditional sanctions evasion, which requires complex networks of intermediaries and physical smuggling operations, cryptocurrency theft can be executed entirely through digital means and converted into resources the regime needs for military modernization. The speed and scale of these operations mean North Korea can generate hundreds of millions of dollars in funding without the lengthy preparation and international cooperation that traditional financial crimes require. North Korean cyber capabilities extend far beyond financial theft to include sophisticated attacks on military infrastructure and communication systems. North Korean hackers have developed specific capabilities for targeting military communications networks. They can intercept and decrypt certain types of military radio traffic, identify command and control frequencies, and inject false information into communication systems during critical operations. Their electronic warfare capabilities include jamming equipment that can disrupt radar systems, communication networks, and GPS-guided weapon systems across significant geographic areas. The coordination between North Korean cyber operations and conventional military planning reflects a sophisticated understanding of modern warfare principles. Kim Jong-un has described cyber warfare as an all-purpose sword that enhances traditional military capabilities by targeting enemy weaknesses that physical weapons cannot reach. Cyber attacks can disable air defense systems before missile strikes, disrupt command communications during ground operations, and create chaos in civilian infrastructure that complicates military response efforts. North Korean military exercises increasingly incorporate cyber warfare scenarios alongside conventional operations. Units practice coordinating missile launches with cyber attacks on enemy communication systems. Special forces train to exploit vulnerabilities that cyber operations create in target infrastructure. This integration means North Korean cyber capabilities aren't separate from their conventional military threat. They're designed to multiply the effectiveness of traditional weapons systems. Western countermeasures against North Korean cyber threats have struggled to keep pace with rapidly evolving attack methods. North Korean hackers adapt quickly to new security measures, change their attack methods frequently, and use the global internet infrastructure in ways that make attribution and response extremely difficult. The asymmetric advantages that cyber warfare provides North Korea cannot be overstated. A country with limited conventional military reach can launch attacks against targets anywhere in the world through internet connections. North Korean hackers can target critical infrastructure, generate massive revenue through digital theft, gather intelligence on foreign military capabilities, and cause widespread disruption while maintaining enough deniability to avoid immediate military retaliation. Conventional military analysis typically focuses on tanks, missiles, and troop numbers when assessing North Korean capabilities. But cyber warfare allows North Korea to achieve strategic effects that traditional military metrics simply cannot capture or predict. And when those cyber capabilities combine with other military developments that intelligence agencies are still struggling to fully understand, the threat assessment becomes far more complex than anyone anticipated. Nuclear arsenal expansion beyond the bomb count. The nuclear dimension transforms every calculation about North Korean military power. Intelligence estimates keep getting revised upward, and that should worry everyone. Previous assessments suggested North Korea possessed maybe 40-50 warheads, a number that seemed manageable within existing deterrence frameworks. Current intelligence reports from 2025 indicate the actual arsenal likely contains approximately 50 warheads, with production capacity suggesting they could reach 90 within the next few years. This isn't just about counting bombs. It's about recognizing that North Korea has solved the industrial and technical challenges required to mass-produce nuclear weapons at a pace that outstrips most expert predictions. The production capacity revelations came through satellite imagery that intelligence analysts initially dismissed as construction errors. In June 2025, the International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed what commercial satellite photos had been showing for months. North Korea had completed construction of a major new uranium enrichment facility at the Yongbyon Nuclear Scientific Research Center. The facility appeared externally complete by May 26, 2025, after construction that began in December 2024. The speed of construction suggested this wasn't an experimental facility. It was industrial-scale infrastructure designed for sustained weapons production. The new Yongbyon facility represents a significant expansion of North Korean uranium enrichment capabilities rather than a replacement for existing infrastructure. Intelligence analysis indicates the facility could produce an additional 7398 kilograms of highly enriched uranium per year, enough material for at least 3 to 4 nuclear weapons annually. As of January 2025, North Korea's IAEA-monitored enrichment sites produce enough yearly highly enriched uranium for 8 to 9 weapons. Combined with the new facility, North Korea can now produce enough fissile material for at least 11-13 nuclear weapons annually, a production rate that approaches the capabilities of established nuclear powers. The development of tactical nuclear weapons represents perhaps the most significant shift in North Korean nuclear strategy since the program began. Kim Jong-un's speeches in 2022 and 2023 specifically outlined goals for mass-producing tactical nukes, moving beyond the strategic deterrent systems that characterized earlier phases of the program. These smaller, lighter warheads are specifically designed for battlefield use against military targets rather than civilian populations, fundamentally changing how North Korea views nuclear weapons in military planning. These tactical nuclear weapons solve specific military problems that conventional weapons cannot address. North Korean military planners understand that their conventional forces would face significant disadvantages against modern South Korean and US military capabilities. Tactical nuclear weapons allow them to neutralize specific military advantages that opposing forces possess, such as air superiority, advanced missile defense systems, or concentrated armor formations. A single tactical nuclear weapon can eliminate an entire aircraft carrier battle group, destroy a major air base, or create contaminated zones that prevent enemy ground operations. The miniaturization progress that enables nuclear warheads on short-range missiles has been steady and systematic. North Korean nuclear weapons designers have successfully reduced warhead weight and dimensions to fit on missiles with ranges as short as 200 kilometers. This capability transforms every North Korean missile system into a potential nuclear delivery platform, from short-range systems that can target South Korean military installations to intermediate-range missiles capable of reaching Japanese bases. Evidence of miniaturization success comes from the consistent performance of North Korean missile tests throughout 2024 and early 2025. The demonstrated payload capacities and flight characteristics of various systems confirm North Korean engineers have solved the technical challenges of delivering nuclear weapons across multiple ranges while maintaining warhead integrity. North Korea's submarine-launched ballistic missile program represents their most significant step toward achieving a survivable nuclear deterrent. The development of sea-based nuclear capabilities provides North Korea with what nuclear strategists call a second strike capability, the ability to retaliate with nuclear weapons even if their land-based systems are destroyed in a first strike. This capability fundamentally changes the strategic calculus for any potential military action against North Korea. The Pukgoksong-3 submarine-launched ballistic missile has demonstrated ranges exceeding 1,900 kilometers during testing, sufficient to target major military installations throughout the region from submerged launch positions. North Korean submarines equipped with nuclear-armed missiles can operate in international waters beyond the reach of immediate military response while maintaining the ability to strike strategic targets. This mobility and concealment make North Korean submarine-based nuclear weapons extremely difficult to locate and neutralize preemptively. Multiple nuclear delivery systems complicate regional defense planning in ways that single-platform threats cannot. Traditional missile defense systems are designed to intercept specific types of incoming threats following predictable trajectories. North Korea now possesses nuclear weapons that can arrive via ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, submarine launches, and potentially artillery systems. Defending against simultaneous attacks from multiple platforms requires defensive capabilities that exceed what any current missile defense system can provide. Nuclear doctrine changes announced throughout 2024-2025 reflect North Korea's growing confidence in their nuclear capabilities and their willingness to use these weapons in a wider range of scenarios. The updated doctrine includes provisions for preemptive nuclear strikes against military targets, nuclear weapon use in response to conventional attacks on North Korean territory, and nuclear escalation to prevent military defeat in conventional conflicts. These doctrinal changes mean North Korean nuclear weapons are no longer purely deterrent systems designed to prevent war through threat of massive retaliation. They have become integrated components of North Korean military strategy, weapons that military planners expect to use during conflicts rather than simply threaten to use to prevent conflicts. This shift transforms every military interaction with North Korea into a potential nuclear scenario. The challenge of accurately assessing North Korean nuclear capabilities lies in the inherent secrecy of the program and the technical complexity of nuclear weapon systems. Intelligence agencies must rely on incomplete information, indirect observations, and technical analysis of limited test data to estimate capabilities that North Korea actively conceals. The consistent pattern of underestimating North Korean nuclear progress suggests these assessments remain conservative compared to actual capabilities. What makes the nuclear dimension exponentially more threatening is how it transforms every other North Korean military capability from a regional security concern into a potential global crisis. But nuclear weapons require resources, technology, and expertise that North Korea couldn't develop entirely through domestic programs. The source of that support became increasingly clear throughout 2024, as intelligence agencies tracked unprecedented levels of cooperation between Pyongyang and a partner that had its own reasons for challenging the existing international order. The Russian connection, arms deals, and technology transfer. The images were unmistakable. On November 15, 2024, commercial satellite photos captured a convoy of North Korean freight trains crossing the border into Russia, their cargo cars loaded with what intelligence analysts immediately recognized as artillery shells stacked in neat rows. The scale was staggering. Train after train carrying hundreds of thousands of rounds of ammunition, moving with the regularity of a commercial shipping operation. This wasn't smuggling or clandestine arms dealing. This was industrial-scale military cooperation happening in broad daylight, captured by satellites that anyone could access online. The scope of military cooperation between North Korea and Russia has transformed from opportunistic transactions into systematic strategic partnership. Since Russia's invasion of Ukraine began in February 2022, North Korea has emerged as one of Russia's most reliable arms suppliers, providing not just weapons, but entire categories of military support that Moscow desperately needs. North Korea exported over 3,152,000 artillery shells to Russia throughout 2023 and 2024, a volume that exceeded Russia's own domestic ammunition production of approximately 2.3 million units for the same period. This makes North Korea literally more important to Russian artillery operations than Russia's own factories. North Korea reportedly earned over $20 billion from arms sales to Russia, mostly from artillery shells and missiles, according to Korea Institute for Defense Analyses estimates. Artillery ammunition represents the largest component of this support, with North Korean factories producing millions of rounds specifically for Russian forces. Beyond ammunition, North Korea delivered 120 Coxswain self-propelled howitzers and 148 ballistic missiles to Russian forces, providing Moscow with weapons systems that could be deployed immediately without requiring extensive training or integration procedures. What North Korea receives in return goes far beyond simple cash payments and represents the kind of comprehensive technology transfer that sanctions were specifically designed to prevent. South Korean intelligence reported that Russian missile technology and specialized components flowed to North Korea in exchange for ammunition and labor support. Russian technicians have been spotted at North Korean missile facilities, providing hands-on training for production processes that North Korean engineers had struggled to master independently. The technology transfer extends to areas where North Korea has historically faced significant limitations. Russian expertise in metallurgy helps North Korean engineers produce better rocket motors and missile components. Advanced electronics and guidance systems technology flows from Russian defense contractors to North Korean weapons facilities. Perhaps most significantly, Russia shares manufacturing techniques and quality control processes that improve the reliability and performance of North Korean weapons systems across the board. Evidence of Russian military advisors working within North Korean facilities comes from multiple intelligence sources, including intercepted communications and satellite imagery showing Russian personnel at previously restricted locations. The Sanamdong missile assembly facility near Hamhung has shown increased activity patterns consistent with foreign technical assistance. Russian aircraft have been observed at North Korean airfields that serve weapons testing ranges, suggesting direct Russian involvement in evaluating and improving North Korean weapons systems. This partnership accelerates North Korean military modernization timelines in ways that domestic development alone could never achieve. Programs that might have taken North Korea a decade to complete independently are now advancing at unprecedented speeds with Russian technical support. The Hwasong-17 intercontinental ballistic missile program showed rapid improvements in reliability and performance that coincided exactly with increased Russian cooperation. Similar acceleration patterns appeared in North Korean hypersonic weapon development, submarine construction, and electronic warfare capabilities. Specific weapon systems show clear evidence of Russian influence or direct technology transfer. North Korean ballistic missiles increasingly use guidance systems that incorporate Russian design elements. The solid fuel rocket motors that power many newer North Korean missiles show manufacturing techniques consistent with Russian production methods. Electronic warfare equipment captured from North Korean forces in Ukraine contained components that matched Russian military specifications, rather than Chinese or domestic North Korean designs. The strategic implications of a strengthened North Korea-Russia military alliance extend far beyond the immediate impact on the Ukraine conflict. This partnership creates a second front of concern for Western military planners who must now consider scenarios where Russian and North Korean military capabilities reinforce each other. North Korean weapons systems benefit from Russian technology, while Russian forces gain access to North Korean production capacity and specialized capabilities like cyber warfare expertise. The relationship changes the regional balance of power in East Asia by providing North Korea with capabilities and resources that traditional sanctions and diplomatic isolation had successfully limited for decades. North Korea's growing military strength, supported by Russian technology and expertise, creates new challenges for South Korea, Japan, and US forces in the region. Military planners must now account for North Korean capabilities that have been enhanced through systematic Russian support rather than constrained by international isolation. The construction that began in June 2025 of North Korea's largest military manufacturing facility near Heuchon demonstrates the institutional nature of this alliance. This facility expands arms production specifically for Russian use, indicating that both countries view their cooperation as a long-term strategic partnership rather than a temporary arrangement. The scale of construction suggests production capabilities that will continue operating well beyond any resolution of the current Ukraine conflict. The partnership introduces volatility into East Asian security calculations that extends beyond traditional threat assessments. North Korea's reduced isolation, increased financial resources, and accelerated weapons development create unpredictable scenarios that challenge existing deterrence strategies. Regional allies must now plan for North Korean capabilities that have been systematically enhanced through Russian support, while North Korea operates with greater strategic confidence due to its strengthened international partnerships. Russian support provides North Korea with something that decades of independent development had failed to achieve: the technical foundation and industrial capacity necessary to mass-produce reliable, modern weapons systems. This transformation creates threats that go far beyond what traditional analysis of North Korean domestic capabilities would suggest possible. Yet for all the intelligence gathering, satellite surveillance, and technical analysis that has revealed these developments, significant questions remain about what North Korean forces can actually accomplish when the propaganda cameras stop rolling and the real capabilities are put to the test. Intelligence gaps, what we still don't know. The challenge of penetrating North Korea's information barriers creates fundamental uncertainties that affect every strategic decision involving the regime. Intelligence agencies face a problem when trying to assess North Korea's actual military strength. They're trying to see through a wall that was specifically built to keep them out. North Korea operates as perhaps the most closed society on Earth, where information control isn't just policy, it's survival strategy for the regime. Every piece of intelligence that emerges from the country has passed through multiple layers of state security, operational deception, and deliberate misdirection, designed to confuse outside observers about what's real and what's theater. Satellite imagery provides the backbone of Western intelligence assessment, but North Korea has spent decades perfecting techniques to make this expensive technology less effective. Mobile missile launchers disappear into mountain tunnels within minutes of detection. Weapons facilities operate under camouflage netting, as documented in IAEA imagery of the Yongbyon enrichment site, making them indistinguishable from civilian industrial sites. Construction projects use techniques that obscure their actual purpose until completion, leaving analysts guessing about function based on incomplete structural evidence. Even when satellites capture clear images, distinguishing between operational military equipment and carefully crafted decoys requires expertise that often proves wrong months later. Signal intelligence faces even greater limitations in a country where electronic communications are strictly controlled. and most sensitive military communications occur through hardwired networks or courier systems that never touch radio frequencies. North Korean military units practice strict communication discipline that limits electromagnetic signatures, while their most important weapons programs operate in facilities with extensive electronic shielding. The signals that intelligence agencies can intercept often represent routine administrative traffic rather than operational intelligence about actual military capabilities. Human intelligence is scarce. Only a handful of junior officers have defected, limiting insight into current capabilities. The few defectors who reach the outside world typically come from lower levels of the military or civilian hierarchy, with limited access to current information about advanced weapons programs or strategic planning. High-level officials with genuine insider knowledge almost never defect, and when they do, their information is often years out of date by the time it reaches Western analysts. North Korean deception and operational security operate on multiple levels simultaneously, creating layers of false information that mask real capabilities behind carefully constructed facades. Military exercises are choreographed to display either more or fewer capabilities than actually exist, depending on the strategic message North Korea wants to send. Weapons tests are staged with specific timing and location choices designed to maximize intelligence collection by foreign observers while revealing only selected performance characteristics. Even failure can be weaponized. Some apparent weapons failures may actually be tests of different system components or deliberate demonstrations of reliability problems that don't actually exist. The gap between parade displays and actual operational readiness represents one of the most persistent intelligence challenges. Military parades showcase weapons systems under ideal conditions with extensive preparation, maintenance, and selection of the best available equipment. These events tell observers almost nothing about how many of these systems actually work, how often they break down during normal operations, or whether North Korean forces possess the spare parts and technical expertise necessary to maintain them during extended campaigns. A missile that performs flawlessly during a parade demonstration might have a 30% failure rate during actual combat operations, but intelligence agencies have no reliable way to determine actual reliability statistics. Western intelligence has been consistently wrong about North Korean capabilities in several crucial areas over the past decade. The pace of North Korean nuclear weapons development exceeded most expert predictions by years. Their cyber warfare capabilities emerged as a serious threat far earlier than intelligence assessments suggested possible. The scale and sophistication of their cryptocurrency theft operations caught financial security agencies completely unprepared. Most recently, the combat effectiveness of North Korean troops deployed to Ukraine surprised military analysts who had dismissed their capabilities based on outdated assessments of training and equipment quality. Distinguishing between propaganda and genuine military advances requires constant vigilance against both North Korean deception and the natural human tendency to dismiss capabilities that seem inconsistent with pre-existing assumptions. North Korea has a documented history of exaggerating weapons performance and staging fake demonstrations to create false impressions of their capabilities. Yet they also have a parallel history of achieving genuine technological breakthroughs that outside observers initially dismissed as propaganda because they seemed too advanced for North Korean technical capabilities to produce. Just as analysts misjudged Soviet nuclear progress, underestimating Kim's advances risks strategic surprise. The risk of overestimating North Korean capabilities can lead to unnecessary military expenditures, heightened regional tensions, and policy responses that play directly into North Korean strategic objectives of gaining international attention and negotiating leverage. Conversely, underestimating their capabilities creates scenarios where North Korean actions surprise policymakers and military planners who base their preparations on incomplete or inaccurate threat assessments. The challenge lies in calibrating assessments that account for both North Korean deception and the genuine advances they have achieved through independent development and foreign assistance. Recent intelligence revelations suggest that previous assessment accuracy was significantly worse than acknowledged at the time. Admiral Bill Gortney's March 2016 statement that it was a prudent decision to assume Kim Jong-un had nuclear miniaturization capability represented a major shift from assessments just years earlier that dismissed this possibility. The discovery of the new uranium enrichment facility at Yongbin in 2024, which began construction without detection by intelligence agencies, indicates that North Korea successfully concealed major infrastructure projects that directly impact their weapons production capacity. New test tunnels at Pyongyang, detected by IAEA in June 2025, revealed prior blind spots in monitoring North Korea's nuclear testing infrastructure. The deployment of approximately 10,000 North Korean troops to support Russian operations in Ukraine caught intelligence agencies off guard, despite extensive surveillance of both countries' military activities. This intelligence failure occurred in an operational context where satellite surveillance, signal intelligence, and human sources should have provided advance warning of such a significant military deployment. The fact that this movement remained undetected until troops were already positioned for combat operations suggests fundamental gaps in intelligence collection and analysis capabilities. These intelligence gaps make North Korea more unpredictable and potentially dangerous because they prevent accurate assessment of both North Korean intentions and capabilities. Policymakers must make crucial decisions about military deployments, alliance commitments, and diplomatic strategies based on incomplete information that may be fundamentally wrong about key aspects of the threat they're trying to manage. Military planners must prepare for scenarios where their assumptions about North Korean capabilities prove incorrect during actual conflict situations. The combination of North Korean deception, intelligence collection limitations, and historical assessment failures creates a situation where the most important questions about North Korean military capabilities remain unanswered. This uncertainty becomes a strategic weapon in itself, forcing potential opponents to prepare for threats they cannot accurately measure or predict. When defense officials across the region finally acknowledged the scope of these intelligence gaps, the implications demanded immediate action that would reshape decades of strategic planning. Regional response: how neighbors are adapting. Senior US, South Korean, and Japanese officials met in early 2025 to address a stark reality. Every existing military plan for containing North Korean threats was now inadequate. The hypersonic missile demonstrations, the cyber attacks that had disrupted South Korean infrastructure, and intelligence reports about North Korean combat experience in Ukraine had shattered decades of strategic assumptions. Military planners who had spent their careers preparing for one version of North Korean threats suddenly faced an entirely different enemy. South Korea's military modernization accelerated dramatically throughout 2024 and into 2025, driven by the recognition that their existing capabilities couldn't match the evolving North Korean threat. Defense spending increased by 26% in 2024, representing the largest single-year military budget expansion since the 1980s. The revised 2024 National Cybersecurity Strategy identified North Korea as the primary cybersecurity threat and emphasized a more proactive approach. This shift represented a fundamental change from South Korea's traditionally defensive cyber posture to what officials described as offensive cyber defense activities. The strategy included strengthening cyber resilience of critical infrastructure and establishing a global cyber cooperation framework specifically designed to counter North Korean operations. The Hyumu missile family received massive funding increases as South Korea scrambled to develop capabilities that could penetrate North Korean defenses and strike high-value targets. The Hyumu 5, unveiled in summer 2024, represents South Korea's answer to North Korean underground facilities. This extremely heavy system was designed specifically to destroy deeply buried targets that conventional weapons cannot reach. The missile weighs approximately 36 tons and carries a warhead powerful enough to collapse underground bunkers and command centers that North Korea has spent decades constructing throughout the country. South Korea's investment in submarine-launched ballistic missiles reflects their growing concern about North Korean first strike capabilities. The ability to launch missiles from submerged platforms provides South Korea with survivable second strike options that remain operational even if North Korean attacks destroy land-based missile systems. These submarine-launched systems give South Korean planners confidence that they can retaliate effectively even after absorbing a coordinated North Korean assault on their military infrastructure. Japan's defense policy transformation has been equally dramatic, representing the most significant shift in Japanese military thinking since the end of World War II. The Japanese government's decision to develop counterstrike capabilities marked a historic departure from their post-war defense policies. Japanese officials now openly discuss scenarios where Japan would launch preemptive strikes against North Korean missile sites to prevent attacks on Japanese territory. This capability includes the acquisition of Tomahawk cruise missiles from the United States and the development of indigenous hypersonic weapons designed specifically for precision strikes against time-sensitive targets. Japanese missile defense upgrades focus on countering the hypersonic and maneuverable re-entry vehicles that North Korean missiles now demonstrate. The existing Aegis Ashore and PAC-3 Patriot systems were designed to intercept ballistic missiles following predictable trajectories. North Korean hypersonic weapons that change course multiple times during flight require entirely different defensive approaches. Japan is investing in advanced radar systems and interceptor missiles capable of engaging maneuverable targets at hypersonic speeds. US force adjustments in the region reflect Pentagon assessments that previous deployments were insufficient to deter an increasingly capable North Korean military. Additional ballistic missile defense destroyers arrived in the region throughout 2024, providing expanded coverage against North Korean missile threats. Fighter squadrons equipped with advanced air-to-air missiles deployed to bases in South Korea and Japan, while B-52 long-range strike bombers conduct regular presence missions designed to demonstrate US commitment to regional allies. The establishment of ROKSDIETCOM, South Korea's new strategic command, represents a fundamental shift in how the alliance manages nuclear deterrence responsibilities. This independent South Korean command integrates strategic weapon systems from all military branches under unified control, reducing South Korea's dependence on US decision-making for certain types of military responses. The command structure allows South Korea to respond more quickly to North Korean threats while maintaining coordination with US forces through existing alliance frameworks. Regional missile defense integration has become a priority as North Korean capabilities outpaced individual national defense systems. South Korea, Japan, and the United States now share missile warning data in real time between Aegis, THAAD, and PAC-3 systems, allowing defensive systems in all three countries to track and engage North Korean missiles from launch to impact. This integration means that a missile launched at Japan can be tracked by South Korean radars and potentially intercepted by US systems, creating layered defensive coverage that no single country could provide independently. The trilateral cooperation between the United States, South Korea, and Japan has strengthened significantly in response to North Korean developments. The three countries established a high-level cyber consultation group specifically focused on countering North Korean cyber operations. This cooperation includes joint cyber exercises, shared threat intelligence, and coordinated responses to major cyber attacks. The group has authority to respond to North Korean cyber operations without requiring separate approval from each government, dramatically reducing response times. The challenge of calibrating responses creates scenarios where any significant defensive improvement could trigger North Korean escalation, designed to prevent the completion of defensive preparations. North Korean officials have stated that they view certain defensive measures as preparation for offensive action, creating situations where defensive improvements designed to enhance stability actually increase the risk of conflict initiation. North Korean military improvements have fundamentally reshaped regional security architecture by creating threats that existing defensive measures cannot adequately address. The combination of hypersonic missiles, cyber warfare capabilities, tactical nuclear weapons, and combat-experienced forces means that North Korea now possesses genuine capabilities to achieve military objectives that were previously beyond their reach. This transformation forces every country in the region to reconsider basic assumptions about deterrence, defense, and crisis management that had guided their policies for decades. Yet behind all these military capabilities and strategic calculations lies a more fundamental question that intelligence agencies are only beginning to understand. How does North Korea actually produce these weapon systems at the scale and quality levels that recent demonstrations suggest? The answer requires looking beyond the weapons themselves to examine the industrial infrastructure that makes sustained military modernization possible. The Manufacturing Revolution, Military-Industrial Complex 2025. The construction cranes never stopped moving. Throughout 2024, commercial satellites captured image after image of North Korean weapons facilities expanding at a pace that defied every economic prediction about a sanctioned economy. The Kangjai General Tractor Plant, which had sat mostly dormant for years, suddenly sprouted new buildings, expanded rail connections, and parking lots filled with worker housing. The February 11 factory near Hamhung doubled in size between spring and winter. The Kusong Machine Complex added entire production wings that hadn't existed 6 months earlier. This wasn't gradual modernization or routine maintenance. This was industrial transformation happening at breakneck speed. The scale of expansion revealed itself most clearly at the Sanamdong Missile Assembly Plant near Hamhung, where satellite imagery showed the facility's footprint had literally doubled by December 2024. New warehouses appeared alongside testing facilities and worker dormitories, while construction crews worked around the clock under floodlights that satellite sensors could detect from orbit. The investment represented massive infrastructure development across multiple facilities, funded by revenue streams that most economic assessments had failed to identify. North Korea's military-industrial complex had spent decades relying on outdated production methods inherited from Soviet-era designs. Factories built in the 1960s and 1970s still used manufacturing techniques that their original designers had considered basic even then. Production lines relied on manual assembly processes. Quality control consisted of visual inspection by workers with minimal training, and most facilities could barely maintain the equipment they already possessed, much less innovate or expand production capacity. The transformation didn't happen gradually. Starting around 2022, North Korean facilities began implementing what intelligence analysts called pragmatic modernization, upgrading production capabilities with whatever technology they could acquire through sanctions evasion networks. North Korea modernized dated production lines with imported CNC machines acquired through shell companies in Malaysia. Precision measuring equipment from Japan arrived via circuitous routes through Southeast Asian intermediaries. Advanced metallurgy equipment that should have been impossible to acquire under current sanctions somehow found its way into North Korean factories. This shift from importing finished weapons to domestic production represented a fundamental strategic change in how North Korea approached military procurement. Instead of depending on Chinese or Russian suppliers who could cut off access whenever diplomatic relations soured, North Korea developed the capability to manufacture weapons systems entirely within their own borders. The KN-25 super-large multiple rocket launcher system exemplifies this transition. It's manufactured completely in North Korea using domestically produced components, from the rocket motors to the guidance systems. More significantly, North Korea now exports weapons rather than just consuming them. Intelligence estimates suggest North Korea earned approximately $20 billion from arms deals with Russia throughout 2023 and 2024, with North Korean factories now supplying roughly half of Russia's artillery ammunition needs. This export capability demonstrates that North Korean manufacturing quality has improved enough to produce weapons that other militaries are willing to use in actual combat operations. Quality control improvements became evident through weapons test results that showed dramatically higher success rates compared to previous years. North Korean missile tests throughout 2024 demonstrated reliability percentages that approached 85% compared to success rates below 60% just 3 years earlier. The consistency of performance across multiple test launches indicated systematic improvements in manufacturing processes, component quality, and assembly procedures, rather than occasional lucky successes. International sanctions inadvertently forced North Korean engineers to become more innovative and self-reliant than they might have been with easy access to foreign components. Unable to simply purchase advanced guidance systems or precision manufacturing equipment, North Korean technicians learned to reverse engineer existing designs and develop indigenous solutions to technical challenges. This forced innovation created capabilities that were more resilient to supply chain disruptions and less vulnerable to foreign suppliers cutting off access during diplomatic disputes. The integration of civilian and military production capabilities allowed North Korea to maximize their limited industrial resources. The Kangjai tractor plant expanded with dual-use artillery shell production capacity, demonstrating how facilities could manufacture both agricultural equipment and military components using the same production lines and workforce. This dual-use approach meant that expanding civilian manufacturing capacity automatically increased military production potential. Workforce training programs expanded dramatically to support increased military production requirements. North Korean technical universities modified their curricula to emphasize skills directly applicable to weapons manufacturing, including precision machining, electronics assembly, and quality control procedures. Workers received specialized training in operating imported equipment and maintaining production standards that met military specifications rather than the lower standards acceptable for civilian products. The regime implemented what they called a Socialist Enterprise Responsibility Management System to empower factory workers to expand production beyond traditional quotas. This system gave state enterprises flexibility to increase output and improve efficiency without waiting for central planning approval. Workers who exceeded production targets received material rewards, while factory managers gained authority to modify production processes to improve quality and efficiency. Reverse engineering played a crucial role in North Korean weapons development, allowing them to acquire foreign technology and adapt it to their specific requirements. The KN-23 missile bears clear resemblances to Russia's Iskander system, while new North Korean drones show design elements borrowed from US models. However, North Korean engineers didn't simply copy existing designs. They modified and improved them based on their specific operational requirements and manufacturing capabilities. Indigenous development efforts complemented reverse engineering by creating original solutions to problems that existing foreign designs couldn't address adequately. North Korean engineers developed specialized guidance systems optimized for their geographic terrain, created missile components designed to use materials available through their supply networks, and modified weapon designs to operate effectively with their existing military doctrine and tactics. Production capacity estimates suggest North Korea can now manufacture approximately 2 million artillery shells annually, along with substantial numbers of missiles, drones, and other weapon systems. This production capability enables sustained military operations at a scale that would have been impossible just 5 years earlier. North Korean military planners no longer need to ration ammunition or limit training exercises to preserve limited stockpiles. The manufacturing revolution creates strategic autonomy that transforms North Korea's position in regional power dynamics. They no longer depend on foreign suppliers who might restrict access during crises or demand political concessions in exchange for military hardware. North Korean leaders can now plan military operations with confidence that their domestic production capabilities can supply whatever weapons and ammunition their forces require. This independence from foreign suppliers means that traditional diplomatic pressure and economic sanctions have reduced effectiveness in constraining North Korean military development. When North Korea manufactured few weapons domestically, sanctions that restricted their access to foreign military technology could significantly limit their capabilities. Now that most weapons production occurs within North Korea using domestically produced components, these same sanctions have minimal impact on their ability to maintain and expand their military arsenal. The transformation enables North Korea to sustain military capabilities independently while generating revenue through weapons exports that fund further military development. Current trends suggest this industrial foundation will support continued military expansion at rates that challenge every existing strategic calculation about North Korean capabilities. Future trajectory, where this all leads. The question now becomes what these production capabilities enable North Korea to achieve over the next decade. Military analysts working with Current Trend data project that North Korea will possess approximately 90 nuclear warheads by 2030, along with delivery systems that include intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of reaching anywhere in the United States with reasonable accuracy. Their hypersonic weapons program will likely produce operational systems with ranges exceeding 3,000 kilometers, while their cyber warfare capabilities will mature into strategic weapons capable of crippling entire national infrastructures for weeks rather than days. These aren't speculative possibilities based on hopeful thinking. They represent conservative extrapolations from development patterns already visible in 2025. The nuclear arsenal expansion follows production curves that intelligence agencies can track with reasonable confidence. By 2025, North Korea's enrichment capacity is enough for 11-13 warheads annually, per KCNA and IAEA estimates. The Congressional Research Service predicts 8-9 highly enriched uranium weapons per year from enrichment expansions, though this figure likely underestimates total production when accounting for plutonium reprocessing capabilities. Facility expansion observed throughout 2024 suggests this production rate will increase to roughly 18-20 warheads per year by 2028. Even accounting for technical failures and quality control issues, North Korea will possess sufficient nuclear weapons to target every major military installation and population center within 2,000 kilometers of their borders, while maintaining strategic reserves for deterrence purposes. Their missile development trajectory follows similarly predictable patterns. The Hwasong-17 intercontinental ballistic missile demonstrated technological maturity that suggests North Korean engineers have solved the fundamental challenges of long-range precision delivery. Current development efforts focus on reliability improvements, payload optimization, and countermeasure integration rather than basic technical capabilities. By 2030, North Korea will likely field intercontinental missiles with success rates exceeding 90% and accuracy sufficient for targeting specific buildings rather than general urban areas. The sustainability question becomes more complex when examining North Korean resource constraints and economic limitations. Current military spending represents approximately 25% of North Korea's estimated GDP, a proportion that most economies cannot sustain indefinitely without triggering social instability or economic collapse. However, North Korea's arms exports to Russia and successful cryptocurrency operations generate revenue streams that traditional economic analysis often underestimates. Their military-industrial complex now functions as a profit-generating sector that partially finances its own expansion through weapons sales. Successful military modernization fundamentally alters North Korean strategic objectives from regime survival to regional influence projection. Current North Korean doctrine emphasizes defensive deterrence designed to prevent foreign invasion or regime change. Enhanced military capabilities enable offensive operations aimed at reunifying the Korean peninsula under North Korean control or establishing North Korean hegemony over regional security arrangements. Military confidence derived from successful modernization could encourage North Korean leaders to pursue objectives that seemed impossible when their capabilities were limited to basic deterrence functions. Enhanced military capabilities will likely change North Korean risk calculations in ways that make conflict more probable rather than less likely. Traditional deterrence theory assumes that nuclear weapons reduce the likelihood of war by making the costs of conflict unacceptably high for all participants. However, North Korean possession of tactical nuclear weapons, hypersonic delivery systems, and cyber warfare capabilities could encourage them to initiate limited conflicts with confidence that they can escalate faster and more effectively than their opponents can respond. North Korean military technology exports represent a potentially significant revenue source that could finance continued military development while spreading North Korean weapons technology to other nations. Countries facing international sanctions or seeking weapon systems that established arms exporters refuse to provide could become customers for North Korean missiles, cyber warfare capabilities, or nuclear technology. Iran, Syria, and various non-state actors have already demonstrated interest in North Korean military technology, suggesting potential markets that could generate billions in export revenue. The challenge of managing a more militarily capable North Korea through diplomacy becomes exponentially more difficult as their capabilities approach parity with established military powers. Traditional diplomatic approaches relied on North Korean military weakness to create incentives for negotiation and compromise. When North Korea possesses genuine capabilities to achieve military objectives through force, diplomatic pressure loses much of its effectiveness. International sanctions that successfully constrained a militarily weak North Korea may prove inadequate against a country with advanced weapons systems and domestic production capabilities. Military deterrence strategies must evolve to address threats that existing defensive systems cannot adequately counter. Hypersonic weapons that can evade missile defense systems require new defensive approaches that don't currently exist. Cyber weapons capable of disabling critical infrastructure during conflicts demand defensive measures that most countries have not yet developed. Nuclear weapons integrated into conventional military operations create escalation scenarios that existing deterrence theories don't address effectively. Continued military development could strengthen Kim Jong-un's domestic political position by demonstrating the regime's competence and providing tangible benefits to the military establishment that supports his rule. Successful weapons programs validate the regime's emphasis on military development while providing career advancement opportunities for military personnel and technical specialists. However, resource allocation toward military programs limits domestic economic development that could improve living standards for ordinary citizens, creating potential sources of internal dissatisfaction. The regional implications extend beyond traditional security concerns to include economic disruption, refugee flows, and alliance relationships that could destabilize East Asian political arrangements. A militarily confident North Korea might pursue unification through force, creating conflicts that would devastate South Korean economic development and trigger massive population displacements. Japanese military preparations in response to North Korean threats could encourage similar militarization throughout the region, undermining decades of economic cooperation and political stability. Global implications include nuclear proliferation scenarios where North Korean technology transfers enable other countries or non-state actors to acquire advanced weapons capabilities. North Korean cyber warfare techniques could spread to other nations, seeking asymmetric advantages against more powerful opponents. The precedent of successful military modernization, despite international sanctions, could encourage other sanctioned regimes to pursue similar strategies, rather than accepting diplomatic solutions to international disputes. Understanding North Korea's military trajectory proves crucial for future peace and security, because current trends suggest fundamental changes in regional power balances that could trigger conflicts with global consequences. Military capabilities that North Korea will likely possess by 2030 enable them to pursue strategic objectives that were previously beyond their reach, while constraining the effectiveness of traditional diplomatic and deterrent responses. Policymakers who fail to account for these capability improvements risk facing crises where their existing tools prove inadequate for managing threats they didn't anticipate or prepare to address. The window for preventing North Korean military modernization has largely closed, making adaptation to enhanced North Korean capabilities the primary challenge for regional security planning over the next decade. What emerges from this analysis isn't a theoretical threat that might develop under favorable conditions, but a military reality that has already taken shape while the world was looking elsewhere. The implications demand immediate attention from policymakers and military planners worldwide. North Korea's highly enriched uranium output is now enough for 9 weapons annually, according to CNS estimates, while their manufacturing capabilities support sustained military operations at unprecedented scales. Their soldiers return from Ukraine with combat experience that transforms theoretical military doctrine into battlefield-tested tactics. Cyber operations generate billions in funding, while demonstrating capabilities to disrupt critical infrastructure across entire regions. These aren't incremental improvements to an outdated military. They represent fundamental transformation of North Korean strategic capabilities that challenge decades of regional security assumptions. The Korean People's Army has evolved into a force that combines advanced weapons technology, proven combat experience, and industrial capacity to sustain prolonged military operations. Subscribe for continued analysis of North Korea's evolving military capabilities and their implications for global security as these developments reshape strategic calculations across East Asia.